The Government of Barbados, in partnership with the International Monetary Fund, is hosting a high-level Caribbean forum on managing the green energy transition. This event brings together regional ministers, central bank governors, private sector leaders, and civil society representatives to collaborate on unified investment strategies and shared solutions for the green energy shift. Joining me is Prime Minister Amor Mottley. Prime Minister Mottley, thank you for making the time. What is the importance of this forum on managing the green energy transition?
Well, as we know, we don't have a choice if we want to become resilient. And I keep saying we're in a race against time to become resilient. Bajans don't need to know that any more than this year when Beryl hit us, or what we've seen with the flooding in different districts of the island because of the convection rain, or in the first 6 months of the year with drought. You've heard me say it over and over. But I think that there's a sense now that I am just talking for the sake of talking, and that the country is in fact feeling the pinch where it hurts. If we're going to get ahead of it, then we need to protect our coastal infrastructure. We need to change. You see all these flat roof houses we got about the place? We need to change the roofs to be able to withstand winds at a certain level. We need to be able to make sure that we are in a position to augment, increase our groundwater, or if not groundwater, other access to water that people can have. So all of these things cost money. And that's why earlier this year we did the investment resilience plan. This meeting here is focusing on one component of it, which is the just energy transition. And as you know, we've said over and over, we have been delayed in a lot of what we want to do because of the regulatory framework not coming together as seamlessly as we would have wanted. Go back to my budget earlier in this year when I spoke about battery storage and how we have to change. And even with the changes that we've made, it's taking longer than we want. So we're talking and seeing how best we can cooperate regionally, because small states don't have the skills. I told the country in March this year, I don't go to sleep worrying about reserves anymore. I go to sleep worrying about skills deficit. Do we have the requisite skills to be able to help us in all of these different areas? We don't. And at the same time, other countries in the region are facing the same thing. So why not cooperate? Energy was not originally a pillar of cooperation in CARICOM. It needs to become one. And we need to also look at pooling investment, as I said this morning, and pooling procurement, and pooling skills in terms of functional cooperation. So that's the importance of this conference here, and it gives us a platform to advance it further. I believe that the specialized skills also that are available through CARTAC, which is an offshoot of the IMF with the support of a number of donor countries, and has been around for over 10, 15 years, that instead of looking purely at financial issues, that there may now be a case for them to look at how they can assist with regulatory issues, particularly with the green energy transition that are needed. If you have regulatory certainty, people will invest like that. And we already know we have about $400 million in the banking system that's being held up with investments that people want to make in renewable energy.
The IMF Managing Director is here on island. What role is the IMF playing as these discussions get underway?
Talking about how best they will support us in terms of capacity issues. The IMF, as you know, is a lender of last resort, so they're not going to put any funds forward other than in the context of a resilient and sustainability trust. And quite frankly, that's the only medium-term money, longer-term money that is available to middle-income countries like Barbados that are vulnerable. And we thank the IMF for being responsive to our requests that countries like us need access to longer-term money with decent moratoria, but those would normally be available to a country like Barbados that is considered middle and upper middle income. But we've explained to them and others that while we may be there in terms of income levels, all of this can go in 24 hours with the wrong storm or the wrong hurricane. So they have been responsive to that, and we're grateful for that. As it relates to this particular meeting, it is more likely to trigger their technical support as well as an appreciation of how best we can work together regionally, recognizing that after 5 years of pandemic and climate crisis and all these other issues, it's time for us to focus purely and squarely on how we strengthen the economic linkages within the context particularly of the single market, CARICOM single market and economy again.
Barbados has successfully completed a debt for climate convergence,
Yes.
the first of its kind in the world. This partnership between IDB, AIB, and JCF, what does this mean for Barbados and by extension the region?
Now let's deal with Bajans first. One, that we will be able to have a new South Coast sewage treatment plant treating water to replenish the aquifers so that we can increase the amount of groundwater that we have, and at the same time providing water up to St. Philip and St. George along the railway line. And we're doing that without increasing our debt by 1 cent. So our debt tomorrow is the same as it was last month, even though we're now in the process of procuring what the services and goods necessary to build out the new South Coast sewage treatment plant. And it's just too simple. Imagine that you had a mortgage, and with that same mortgage, without increasing your debt, instead of having one house, you got two houses. That's effectively what has been done with the debt. So we have increased assets for the same level of debt. Haven't increased the debt at all. What does it mean for the region? It shows what's possible for a number of other countries. Problem with the Caribbean is that we have high indebtedness, low growth, and therefore there's not enough fiscal space to be able to build out some of the resilience that they need. This now stands as an example of how countries can repurchase their debt and working with other partners through issuing lower cost debt as well as through guarantees, can use the savings to be able to invest in other things that are critical to build resilience but not increase their debt levels. So Barbados has shown, and previously what would have happened is that you would have taken out that money in savings over a 15-year period. In this case, Barbados says, no, we want the money up front to build an asset up front that is going to work for the country. How does it work for the country? By increasing the water resources in the country, there's less likelihood of scarcity as we go forward in droughts. By ensuring that we have more water going into St. George and St. Philip, we can increase agricultural production even when there are difficulties in terms of water supply. So that's the significance of it.
Prime Minister Mottley, thank you for making the time.
Thank you, my dear.
Coming up, IMF Managing Director Kristalina Georgieva joins us. Joining me for a one-on-one interview is IMF Managing Director Kristalina Georgieva. Ms. Georgieva, thank you for making the time.
It is my great pleasure.
Transitioning to greener economies is an urgent priority. What steps can governments take to accelerate this transition?
For countries in the Caribbean, it is so important that the whole world embraces this transition. And of course, when these countries demonstrate it can be done, it helps to create a better environment for action. What can governments do? First, put in place the right policies. Eliminate harmful fossil subsidies that push the consumer towards what is bad for climate, and create predictable conditions for renewable energy. Feed-in tariffs, so the producer knows what would be the market price for what the producer offers. Also, very important to have predictable regulation, permitting. If you want to put solar panels on the roof of your house, you want to be sure that you will get a permit quickly, that all of this is going to be hassle-free. Second, governments can direct more attention to private investors by having a good investment climate, not just for the green transition, for everything, but it helps the green transition tremendously. And thirdly, motivate organizations like the IMF, like the World Bank, to put more financing in the direction of this transformation. And I can tell you that this region has been championing this cause. Prime Minister Mottley front and center in these discussions.
You're visiting the Caribbean nearly 6 months after Hurricane Beryl caused widespread devastation, with some islands being almost entirely destroyed. This, no doubt, will result in a significant amount of climate debt. What is the IMF's approach to supporting countries in managing the financial costs incurred due to climate-induced disaster?
I spent the afternoon yesterday to see for myself what Beryl has done to the coastal area of Barbados, and it was a very sobering experience. You can see the damage on infrastructure, but especially how the beaches are being washed away. For a country that so much depends on tourism, you lose your beaches, you lose your tourists. And supporting Barbados to build stronger resilience is a priority for the fund. We have a very important instrument, Resilience and Sustainability Trust, that is squarely dedicated to finance resilience in member states. And for us, this is the most important way in which we help countries. But we also help by providing the analytical background of what is happening to then amplify the message to the international community that more needs to be done. We are one of the institutions most actively engaged in debt restructuring, debt reprofiling, in case when that is unsustainable. I'm very proud that here in Barbados, when Prime Minister Mottley came into power and the country was broke, we helped Barbados to restructure its debt, to step on its feet and to do so well today. We also have a small instrument that is specifically dedicated for emergency financing. So when a disaster hits, countries can come to the fund and we can provide swiftly, virtually within days, financial support. In terms of debt easing, we also can help countries that are particularly stressed, poor countries with debt obligations to the fund, to get a grant from us. So instead of having to choose whether they pay the fund or they feed their people or recover the affected areas, they can take break from that service to the IMF.
And I'm glad that you mentioned the Resilience and Sustainability Trust, because while it does help low-income and vulnerable middle-income countries build resilience, one key requirement for accessing the RST is that countries must be in an IMF-supported program. Why is this conditionality necessary?
Well, let me start by the great thing about the RST. It is innovation of the kind we need more of. When we provided special drawing rights to our members, some of them needed the money for liquidity and reserves. Some just put it at the bottom of their reserves, they really didn't need it. So we called on them and said, why don't you lend through us to low-income countries and vulnerable middle-income countries on concessional long-term terms money so they can build resilience to climate shocks. And so we got a target of 40 billion. Today we have 48 billion already. Why? Because it is a wonderful instrument. It helps countries with policies and also create fiscal space to do what is necessary for more resilient, for climate-friendly economies. Why are we asking to pair this with a program? Because when we do so, we have better insights of what are the policies in a country, what may be the shortcomings, where we need to concentrate attention. Very important to recognize that it could be one of the programs in which the country borrows from the fund, but it can also be non-borrowing program. We have this policy coordination instrument in which the country doesn't borrow from the fund, doesn't need the money from the fund, but appreciates the framework that the fund program provides. For example, I met with the Prime Minister of Iraq recently. They asked for this policy coordination instrument because it gives them better standing internationally, helps with the credit rating agencies. And we think that given that the money in the RST is not unlimited, having this strength of engagement with the country that gives this better foundation for the RST actually works. Of course, we would do in 2026, we would take stock, we would revisit the parameters. Maybe at this time we would say, now we have a strong body of experience with the RST that gives us confidence that even without that kind of programmatic engagement, we can have successful policy reform on the climate front. I don't know, but what I know is that in short 20 months, we have done 20 programs, so interest from the membership is very high. Barbados and Jamaica are the two countries from the Caribbean. About 10% of what we have provided so far is for these two countries. Two, the queue is very long. We have 30 countries that are saying, please, we want to be part of that. Three, because of the shocks from COVID, from the war in Europe, from inflation, we have an unusually large number of countries in programs. So plenty to do, and in 2026, we would ask the question you're asking me today one more time.
And speaking of accessing finance, Barbados has successfully completed the world's first Debt for Climate Conversion, a groundbreaking partnership with the IDB, EIB, and the Green Climate Fund. What role do you see the IMF playing in helping to facilitate convergence similar to this to free up resources for climate action?
We are very supportive of innovation to raise more financing for climate action because the climate crisis is already here. And when it comes down to that, we offer three parts of the necessary service. Number one, debt sustainability analysis. We can provide the potential parties in a debt swap objective information of what exactly is the structure of a debt of a country, what are the parameters that may be best utilized for a swap arrangement. Two, we ourselves think of ways in which we encourage countries to reduce their debt service costs. In the case of Barbados, that's exactly what has happened. The cost of debt service for Barbados went down. So we are interested to see more of this. And three, we bring countries with experience together so we can distill best practice and then amplify the debt for climate swap opportunity so others can use it. The fund is like a transmission line. We have 191 members. We learn in one place and then we pass this knowledge to others.
Ms. Georgieva, thank you for making the time.
Thank you very much.
And thank you for joining us.